بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. My dear Shaykh, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we are continuing the chapter of purification, and we are in the section of al-najasa wa izalatuha, the impurity, the physical impurity, and how to remove of it. So al-najasa, basically, linguistically, it's about something which is we can translate it as filth. However, filth can have a wider meaning, but the Sharia has defined it as not just any filth, but a filth which prevents the Salah from being correct. All right, if there's no dispensation. So some things might be filthy, people don't like it. Like for example, maybe the phlegm that comes out, or maybe the mucus, or things like that, which might be considered filthy, or even mud or whatever, but that might not be najis, because the Sharia hasn't defined that as najis. However, if it is something which actually prevents the correct aspect of the salah, then it is a najasa. So what are the najasat? The najasat, number one, is al-khamr, which is wine. Even if it is what is considered respected. What does respected wine mean? How can you have respected wine? Basically, respected wine, because even in a Muslim country, wine can still exist in a halal way by being owned by non-Muslims. So people of the book, Christians, Jews, who are living in a Muslim country, they might have their own wine. So they're allowed. It's allowed for them. And so they might have bought it in a certain way, or they might have done it themselves and they have kept it. So this is considered respected, meaning that it is their property. It's not allowed for you to go and do anything to it. So you can't go and do, try to dispose of it or whatever. So even though it is respected in that sense, meaning that it is owned, it is still najis. All right, so it's still najis. Another type of respected could also be that the alcohol that has been made, or has been the fruit has been squeezed for the purpose of making vinegar. Because you know that vinegar is made by the fruit sugar, then that turns into an alcohol, and then it goes into a vinegar. So while if it has been squeezed for the purpose of being made into vinegar, then it will go through a stage of being an alcohol. That stage, it's also considered respected. All right, because the purpose is to make it into something which is halal, but it's going to go through a process of being a type of alcohol. So khamr, which is the wine, is najis, and it is obviously the aspect of the what is a liquid, a liquid intoxicant, if you like. The second thing which is similar to khamr is something called nabidh. And nabidh is basically a fruit juice, but it has gone over a certain period, usually a day, and it's starting to change into an alcohol, into a wine. In the past, people didn't have like freezers and fridges and things like that. So what they do is they would squeeze the dates or the grapes to drink. The grape itself has a natural yeast. So if it is left for a while, it will start to change into alcohol. So usually within if it's squeezed and drunk, that's fine. Once it's left, it's going to start to ferment and to become. So once it's more than a day, it might not have fully become wine, but it's on its way, and that's called nabith. So that is also najis because it is, if you like, the intermediate to becoming a wine. Thirdly, al-kalbu, dog, wal-khinziru, the pig or the swine, وَمَا تُوَلِّدَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا, whatever comes from them as an offspring. And here they mention this because sometimes you might have the interspecies mixing, which might be rare, but it might happen. So anyway, the point being is that a dog, even though it might be a taught dog or a respected dog, in the sense that it means a respected dog means domesticated, it has a purpose, is still najis. Does that mean it is haram to keep a dog?
No.
Huh? Why not?
Because you can keep it to protect livestock or the house, or if you blind some guide dog.
Yeah, so the dog can have many functions, and it has been used as a for many reasons, some which are mentioned in the hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ, indeed the Quran mentions the dogs that are being used for hunting, so they will hunt, they will catch the prey, and that is also halal to eat. It's a form of hunting. But there's also dogs that can be used for looking after the sheep dogs, or the herding, that helping with herd the animals. And some of the modern uses of dogs, like you mentioned, blind guide dogs for the blind, and now there's also something called guide dogs for the hearing, and for deaf people. They also help for people who are deaf, and also dogs are now used for other reasons, like they are used also for searching, like searching for missing people or dead people and rescues, or even searching for drugs and things like that. So the dogs have many uses, but that still isn't remove them from the najis perspective. Now, initially, having dogs for security probably wasn't something that was considered an acceptable reason initially. Why? Because it was considered that generally people, generally safety was already, and it was almost like guaranteed through other perspectives. A Muslim community with the different laws, that are considered to be safety. But then obviously it's going to be related to time and place, etc. There was the Malikis were a little bit more, if you like, more stricter in this. And one of them, the later Malikis, I think it was Abu Zayd al-Qayrawani, he had a dog for security. And so one person said to him that, Imam Malik doesn't accept this, as a cause. And he said his famous saying, he said, if Imam Malik was living in our time, he would have taken a lion as a security, not as just the dog. And meaning that times have changed, people aren't as honest as before. There's more thieves and the like.
Yeah, for sure. Today I received it. إفتاء مصر.
Yeah.
حسب المالكية أن الكلب ما يعتبر نجس.
Yeah, of course, yeah. This is according to the Maliki. Yeah, of course. According to the Maliki, it's not the dogs now, but according to the Shafi'i madhab, it is najis, as we will show the reasoning for it, inshallah, very shortly. And like I say, the dog has many uses. Even one of the authors, his name was, I think, Ibn al-Marzaban. He wrote a book which called تفضيل الكلاب على كثير ممن لبس الثياب. the superiority of the dogs over many who wear clothes. Meaning that dogs are better than, in some cases, better than the humans. And obviously he goes into a lot of reasoning about how the dogs have certain qualities, certain characteristics. Anyway, let's not go too far off. So the dog and the khanzir. Now why did we say that the dog is najis? Because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which he said that if the dog licks into a bowl of any one of you, then you have to wash it 7 times. One of them should be with earth. So this is a clear indication that the dog is najis, because otherwise why would there be a command to wash the dog, to wash the bowl 7 times? And here it's an extensive type of washing. Why is it an extensive type of washing? Because 7 times, and it's even more than basic. And what the Shafi'i ulama said, that the Islam generally does not allow wastage. So if the dog was tahir, then why would there be a request to waste water basically, and not only once, 7 times. So it shows that there is an indication of that. Another evidence as well, they said that the Prophet ﷺ naha an thaman al-kalb, that the Prophet ﷺ, he did not accept, or he forbid or prohibited the price of a dog, meaning that a dog should not be sold. And they said again, the reason for that goes on to another principle, which mentioned in the other lessons, that when you're selling something, you shouldn't be selling something that is najis, because it's not acceptable. As for the khinzir, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran when he says that al-khinzir, he mentions the rijs. He said, أو لحم خنزير فإنه رجس, which means najis. Okay. The 5th category of najasa is al-mayta, any dead animal. Okay, any dead animal, with the exception of 2 or 3. The Prophet ﷺ said, أحلت لنا ميتتان, 2 dead types of dead animals have been halal for us. السمك والجراد. So fish and locusts are halal. So even if they're dead, they are still halal to be consumed, and therefore they are still halal in terms of they are not najis. And we can add as well, if we include the human as a animal, that even when a human dies, he is not najis. Okay, so the human does not become najis. So here we have a general kind of rule, if you like, a maxim, which is every living animal is tahir, except the dog and the swine or the pig. And every dead animal is najis, except the fish and the locust. Alright? So that is the sort of general maxim. What is a dead animal? A dead animal basically is either an animal that has died from a natural cause, or has not been slaughtered correctly, or has or is an animal that cannot be consumed. Alright? So an animal that cannot be consumed means you can't eat it, okay? Even if you slaughter it, it's still considered as dead. Like for example, if we say a cat is cannot be consumed, okay, as an animal. It's not halal to eat cat meat, and so, therefore even though the animal was slaughtered in a halal way, the animal is still considered as najis, it's dead. All right. However, if you have a cow, sheep, a horse, they are slaughtered, or they are killed in the halal way, or a deer that is hunted or something, when it dies, it doesn't become najis. So that's not mayta. So al-mayta animal is any animal that died either naturally or is not being slaughtered. So that's number 5. Number 6 is blood. So any flowing blood is also najis. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions, أو دما مسفوحا, and obviously includes all different types of blood. And it also includes that which is a subset of blood, which is pus. Alright, so pus is also considered najis. You know, when you have a spot here, and that is the pus, the accumulation, because pus is really a derivative of blood. It's made out of blood. And then we have vomit, and then we have feces, and by feces it includes all types of feces, okay, from any animal, all right? Because I mentioned last week that even when the Prophet ﷺ was brought feces, he mentioned one of the
washing.
Yeah, one of the companions, the Prophet ﷺ asked them to bring him some stones. So he brought 2 stones and he brought a dry feces, thinking that could be used for istinja. So the Prophet ﷺ took the stones, but he then threw away the feces, and he said, "This is innaha riks. It is also najis." So he didn't accept it. And obviously also includes al-bawl. And al-bawl, generally, there is general hadith, the generality of the bawl. In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, when he spoke about, he said, "Tanazzahu min al-bawl," cleanse yourself from the urine. فَإِنَّ عَامَّةَ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ مِنَ الْبَوْلِ. Majority of the punishment of the grave is from the urine. And so that is a general term. Now some people say, okay, what about the urine of the camel? Okay, is that because there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, a group of people came to him and they were complaining about some stomach pain, and so he ordered them to go and to a certain herdsman who had some camel, and he ordered them to stay there with him for some nights, and to drink from the milk of the camel and from its urine. Okay, and so they did that. They were better. Now here, we said this sounds like a very specific case. So it's almost like a specific scenario where the Prophet ﷺ gave almost like an exception to the general rule, but the generality of the matter remains that this is najis. Wallahu a'lam. So then we have al-madhi. Al-madhi is the pre-sexual fluid. So any fluid that comes, it's basically a fluid which is described as being colorless but very viscous, very sticky, and it comes out usually when there is arousal happening. And the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith, he was asked about this, so he ordered the person to wash his organ and to make wudu. So it showed that it is najis. And the other type of liquid that also may come out from the organ is something called wadi, which is almost like it's really not it's not like a healthy thing that comes out. It usually comes out from people who might be suffering from some sort of prostate disease or whatever. So it's like a very thick, milky liquid that comes usually after urine. So a person would urinate, and it's like a liquid which doesn't come out naturally, if you like. It might come out sometimes, they say, if you have like lifted heavy stuff or whatever. So there is something not related to let's say a healthy aspect, but nonetheless, if it does come out, it is najis. Also, the water or the liquid that comes out from a person a person's mouth when he's sleeping, and by this it means the liquid that's come out from the stomach. All right, so it is any stomach liquid, okay, that comes out. Obviously, if it's mixed with food, it's going to be vomit. But if it's not mixed with food, it might just come out as like stomach juices. So that is considered najis. However, saliva is not najis. All right, so if you're, you're sleeping and you just all the saliva just leave, that's not najis. But if it's from the stomach, it is. Now, our madhab has considered, based on the evidences, that semen, which is the sexual fluid, many, is not najis. And why is it not najis? For a number of reasons. One, that there is a hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha that she said, I used to remove the semen that was on the clothes of the Prophet ﷺ. If it was moist, I would wash it, but if it had dried, I would just rub it off. Okay, it's a hadith of Aisha, and that shows that it's not najis. Why? Because if it was najis, it has to be washed, even if it's dry. All right, as we will mention in a little bit, inshallah. All right, so that gives us an indication that mani is not najis. The other evidence, which is more of an evidence of deduction, which is al-mani, the semen, is actually the origin of where the human is created from. Okay, so the human is created from semen, and so therefore it is not befitting to say that the human is created from something which is najis. All right, so there's that almost like derivation as well. And so based on that, the many of all animals is also what? Najis or tahir? The many, the semen, is also going to be tahir, except the dog and the swine, because their origin is najis, so the many is also going to be najis. Alright? The next najasa is وَلَبَنُ مَا لَا يُؤْكَلْ لَحْمُهُ إِلَّا الْآدَمِي. So any milk from an animal which you do not consume its meat is also najis. So milk from a lion, yeah, or from lioness, or milk of a tiger or a hyena or a wolf, or all these animals which you don't eat, a donkey you don't eat, they are also najis. As for al-alaka is basically one of the stages of development of a fetus. So anything that is developmental of a fetus, the alaka, the mudgha, the human goes through a number of processes. So it starts off with there being a mani, which is the sexual fluid, that changes into becoming mudgha, then it changes into becoming a alaka. So all these are, if a woman miscarries and that fetus, sometimes very small, that is not najis, because again it is a foundation of the human. Also, the moistures that are coming, the moisture that is coming in around the private parts, that's also not najis. And the moisture which might be sweat or whatever isn't najis. Okay, so this is just like natural, if you like, najasa. This is different from what we mentioned as the sexual fluid, pre-sexual fluid. Anything that is cut off from an animal is considered similar as its dead animal. So if you have a sheep and you cut off its leg, that leg is considered dead, all right? Because the animal is still alive. You cut off the leg, The leg, you can't consume it. It's not halal to eat, all right? However, if you cut off the animal, something which is eaten from its covering, so its hair or its wool or anything like that, its feather, if the animal is consumed, then it is not najis, it's tahir. So if you cut off the hair of the goat or the camel or the wool of the sheep or the feathers of a duck, they are all tahir. Okay. However, an animal which is not consumed, like a donkey or like a cat, then its hair is not tahir, it's najis. So how do things become tahir? So essentially, we have things that can become tahir by themselves. So the things that become tahir by themselves are essentially two things, although the author here he mentions three, but essentially there are two. Wine, if it changes to vinegar, it becomes tahir, okay, along with its vessel. So if it is wine which has been made for the process of becoming vinegar and it changes, it is tahir, all right? And usually that has to be done by itself. So traditionally, they would say that you just do it by itself. Okay, so it just changes by itself. However, I think today there is an exception, because in the past they were saying if you add something to the wine, it doesn't become tahir, because it's like you are adding, you're trying to process. But I think there's a distinction here in the past, which obviously is not taken into consideration when people are looking at the text from in the past. In the past, they didn't used to have manufacturing and factories and things like that. So what they had was, if you bought wine, you might be a Muslim, but you're drinking wine, and then you repented to Allah, and you said, okay, well, I've got this wine, why let it go to waste? Let me change it into vinegar, and that will be so now I'll add something to it and make it into a vinegar. So here you're interacting with your, if you like, your personal stock, and to try and make use of it. And that's why even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when the prohibition of wine was revealed, the hadith says that everybody went to their container of wine and they just spilt it. Alas, they got rid of it. And the streets of Medina were filled with wine, like rivers of wine or small puddles of wine, because people would just get rid of their wine. If it was halal for them to make use of it and change it to alcohol, then they wouldn't have spilt it, and that's where the evidence comes in that regard. However, today the world has changed, because people now go through manufacturing to make vinegar. You can't rely as in the past on local amounts. People are now making vinegar on large scale, factory scales. And these factories have to, they by the whole nature of the material and commercial things, they have to do it quickly. They can't be waiting, for months for it to slowly change. So they will maybe get an actual item, they will make it into an alcohol, and then they would change it into a vinegar. And so they will add things to the process. Now, traditionally, they'll probably say that is still najis, because you're interfering in the process. But I think, in real terms, from a modern perspective, we have to consider that this is done for a commercial reasons. The need is much greater, and so adding of chemicals to speed up the process is really for a commercial reason, not for a reason of that you already have the wine and you're just trying to avoid getting. Do you see the difference? And that will bring us to another topic which I'll mention towards the end, inshallah. The second thing that can become tahir is if you have an animal that has died, so a dead animal, like a cow, died or has not been slaughtered, you can make use of the hide. The hide is najis, yeah, because it's a dead animal. You can make use of the leather, the hide, by tanning it. A process called tanning, or in Arabic, dabagh. And the dabagh basically is a kind of process where you clean the hide, you get rid of all the fat and all the meat, so you're just left with the leather, and then you're going to soak it in chemicals to remove any of the moisture or whatever, and that basically is tanning. Now, nowadays people use things like, they might use the sun, they might use earth, they might use pomegranate, the peel of the pomegranate is quite, I think they call it anhydrous, it pulls out the water. If you go to some of these abbeys here in the UK, and sometimes you read some of the things that they got up to, the monks used to also do tanning, but they would use their own urine. Okay, because again, the urine being acidic, it's got the uric acid or the urea. That urine also, we used to use it for tanning as well. So anyway, so you can use the chemicals to basically tanning. That's going to make a najis hide into tahir. Now, if you've used something like urine, then you will have to wash it again. Yeah, you're going to wash the hide. It's going to be tahir after that. All right.
Is any leather permissible?
Sorry?
So if you were to turn swine...
No, so swine doesn't become...
Okay.
It doesn't become... in the Shafi'i madhab doesn't become... what do you call it? Tahir. Nor does the dog leather. Okay? Whereas like in the Maliki madhab, because they don't consider dog as being najis, or even the swine as being najis, as a live animal, so it's not a problem for them to. Although I'm not sure if they allow it after tanning. I think the Hanafis they do for the dog. So, well, that's a different topic. Okay, now essentially we've talked about the najasat. The najasat are on 3 levels. We have the normal najasa level, we have what's known as a lessened najasa, mukhaffafa, and we have mughallada, a heightened najasa. So the normal najasa is basically the majority of the najasat. The heightened najasa is the dog and the pig. So anything that's related to the dog and the pig is going to be a heightened najasa. A heightened najasa, you can't just wash it away. You have to wash it 7 times with water, or 7 times. One of those times is going to be with earth. All right. So say you have a bowl or a cup. It's washed. You're going to wash it with water, and then you're going to add earth to it. So the earth is like it's going to act like it's like a cleansing. It's going to remove some of the. So it's acting. I mean, also that's why some of the ulama, although this is not an accepted, let's say, established opinion in the method, but they think it's like a detergent. So it's acting like a soap. All right. So that's why some people in the past they didn't have soap, so they were using earth. But nowadays, if you had soap, you can use soap as an exception. I mean, sometimes you might be in a situation where you're going to get earth. How am I going to get earth? So that would be the way to deal with that. But anyway, so water, earth, then you're going to wash it another 5 times with water. And we know that this is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the heightened najasa. It includes any part of the dog, any part of the swine. But for the najasa to transfer, there must be moisture. Okay? So moisture to moisture for the najasa. So if you're walking in the street and the dog just brushes you, if his body is not wet and your trousers isn't wet, then that's it. That's fine. There's no najasa there because there's no wet to wet. All right. However, if one of them is wet, your body or his body is wet, it's gonna transfer. All right, and obviously saliva is wet, so that's going to be automatic. So that's the heightened najasa. The lessened najasa is basically the urine of a baby boy who has not weaned, so still drinking breast milk, all right, up to the age of 2 years. So if we have a baby boy still drinking breast milk below the age of 2 years, because sometimes they can drink breast milk even more, so they still haven't eaten solid food, their urine is still najis, but it is a lessened najasa. And the lessened najasa, the Prophet ﷺ said, yurashu min bawl al-ghulam. So you can just sprinkle water on it. But the urine of a girl has to be washed. Alright, in the hadith. Now, this has led some of the ulama to say, okay, why is that the case? Okay. And they came up with a very, let's say, comical, because they're comical, but I mean, these are ulama, but their comical idea is that they're saying, why is it that the boy, they said because people tend to carry the boy more than they carry the girl, which you can see how it is a comical thing to say. Okay, so there's more boys being carried, so there's more likelihood of the najasa, and so therefore it's like a dispensation for them. My take on this, my opinion, is that actually this is not probably the main reason, but this is my take on it. And remember, while we might be joking about what they said, everybody is limited by the knowledge that they have. So they have a certain knowledge at that time. They're gonna make certain, because why girl wash boy. So for me, I think for the boy, the nature of the urine of the boy, or the way that the boy urinates, has the potential to spread najasa more. Okay, I mean nowadays we have nappies and the children, but if in the past they don't have nappies, and they don't have so a child is just wearing. Now when they urinate, the urine of a boy can just sprinkle everywhere, especially if they're lying down. It probably can and it's going to be very. Whereas with the girl, it just forms a puddle, all right, around the child. So practically, it is less of a awkward situation to come and go around. We're going to be scrubbing the walls, if the child is urinating. So that's the perspective that I came up with. Now, fast forward to today with the scientific advances, they've actually found that the urine of the girl actually contains a very high proportion of germs compared to the urine of the boy. So, and that is probably related to, because if you think about the urine of the boy, it's actually coming out from an area, it's not mixing with anything, and it's not mixing with the skin, it's just coming out straight through whereas with the girl, it's coming into, and it's inside, so it's coming and it's mixing with all the areas of her private parts, which naturally those have yeasts and they have bacterias, okay, because it's a moist area, so it's mixing with that. So, subhanAllah, I think I read a paper on this somewhere that, that is actually been shown that the amount of germs, when they compare the urine of a baby girl, to the urine, they found that the number was significantly high. And there you go. So that's something that nobody knew and nobody could have known in the past. They came up with this reason about the carriage and everything, which doesn't make sense. But in fact, there is a wider sense which only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was aware of, and the Prophet ﷺ told us about. So anyway, don't make the mistake. Some people get confused. So the urine of the boy is still najis, but it's considered a lessened najasa, and it's only the urine. All right, it's not the feces. It's not if they have started to eat solid foods, etc., etc. All right. Now, besides that, all other najasat are considered normal, if you like, category najasa, and they need to be washed. All right. and they need to be washed. Essentially, the najasa is going to be two types. Either it is physically exists, all right, somebody urinated, as the hadith, we know the hadith of the guy who urinated in the masjid. The Prophet said, get some water, wash the urine away with water, all right, just throw the water on it, the water will take away the najasa, okay? So that's a physical presence. Now if it's stools, for example, feces, you're going to have to remove the feces, so you have to remove the physical. Now also, you're going to have to make sure that nothing remains of the najasa. Any item essentially has three qualities: smell, taste, and color. All right? So if everything is removed, but one of the qualities, or either smell or color, remains, then that's going to be allowed. So you cleansed it, but you just have a color remaining. There's no smell, there's no taste. Okay? The color, we say khalas, it's fine, it's tahir. Now you cleaned it, you've done your best. Only the color. This might happen with clothes. You have white clothes, whatever. However, if taste remains only, then the taste is considered a very weak quality. So if taste is there, it means that the najasa still exists to a certain. So taste is not an excuse. The other ones, either smell or color, if one of them exists, that's fine. If both of them exist, it's not fine. It means you still need to wash. You have to keep on washing until you get rid of those qualities, all right? Ideally, you'd be aiming to remove all the qualities. So if it's blood, if it's, we mentioned all the other najasa as well. Now, if some najasa has occurred, but say a child urinated on the ground, and so you have a najasa, but this dried with time, okay? Could be just a wooden floor or concrete floor. Urinated, we know that the urine is there, nobody washed it away, but it dried with the heat or whatever. This area is still najis, okay? Because even though the water has evaporated, the chemicals are still there, so it still needs to be washed, okay? Now if you walked on it with a dry foot, the najasa is not going to transfer, because remember, dry to dry doesn't transfer. But if you walked on it with a wet foot, the najasa is going to transfer. So you gotta wash it. The najasa stays there until you actually wash it away, okay, even though it dries. That could be on your clothes, it could be anywhere. So just because your clothes have dried doesn't make it tahar. You still have to wash it. And that's obviously going to be important, because if you're going to be praying in your clothes or praying on this area or whatever. All right? We're going for time. Okay. So that's with regards to najasat. Okay? Usual question that we have here, which comes up, is the whole question of alcohol. Okay? Which is that we mentioned wine, okay? But a lot of the time people, they come up with this whole thing about alcohol. Is alcohol najis or not? Now, when you look at the Quran, the Hadith, there's no mention of alcohol. It's a mention of khamr, yeah, which is the wine. And khamr, if we look at it from a chemical perspective, it's basically fermented sugar. So it's a sugar from a fruit. I mean, traditionally they even used to consider khamr, wine, only as that which comes from grapes and dates. That's all. They didn't used to consider khamr from any other fruit. Yani from a verbal perspective, from a linguistic perspective. So if you got a cider, apple or berries or whatever and you made that, wasn't considered khamr. Okay, it's still an intoxicant, still haram, but it wasn't considered as a khamr. Anyway, the point being is that the Quran doesn't talk about alcohol. Alright, it talks about khamr as being, and khamr is something that has gone through a process. What is the process? Fermentation, and that has made it najis. Okay, Now, what some of the ulama came and gone, they came to deal with the whole concept of alcohol, and they said, well, alcohol, khamr contains alcohol, and so therefore what makes it najis is the alcohol as a chemical, and therefore anything that contains alcohol is also najis. So they made, if you like, a jump here of trying to make an analogy between what makes khamr najis and the alcohol that it contains in it, which I think is quite a leap. It's quite a leap, because alcohol is a chemical end of the day, and a chemical can be manufactured, it can be brought together, but what makes something najis is the process, it's not the chemical. And an example for this is your urine. Your urine, or anybody's urine, is made out of chemicals, essentially mostly water, but it has some salts, it has some urea, etc. Now, in theory, your urine, in theory, could be like water. It could be water. How can that happen? Well, if you keep on drinking water, you go to the toilet, end of the day, the only thing that's going to remain is just water. So even when you go to the toilet, it comes out, same color as water, everything. Now, if we were to analyze the urine and say it was water, okay, meaning that there's nothing, there's no salts, there's no urea, etc. Does the urine now, can we say it is tahar?
No.
No. Why? Because it's the process. It's the fact that it has come out of the body in a certain way which has made it najis, irrelevant of the chemical composition. And similarly, if we now in a factory, in a laboratory, we got some water and we added some color to it, we added some urea, we added some salts, and we made it a similar consistency as urine. Okay? It's all manufactured, all right? And we made it in terms of smell, in terms of color, it's like the same consistency. Can we say this now is najis? Huh? No, it's not najis. Why is it not najis? Because it's a chemical. The chemicals were a tahir. We made it through a chemical. The urine contains salt, it contains urea, it contains lots of stuff which can be found as chemicals, and they can be brought together. So the process is what makes it najis, not the actual composition. And I think this is the main difference between fermented sugar, which becomes alcohol, and manufactured alcohol. Alcohol which is made in the laboratory or the factory, they make it for its qualities. The qualities is that alcohol is a very good solvent, allows to dissolve things in it. So I think that's an important distinction which makes a difference between when we categorize alcohol as being najis or not. And I think that's the leap that a lot of the ulama made, which I don't think is correct. And that's why, if you think about it, then all the manufactured alcohol is not going to be najis. What you're going to use in your perfumes, what you're going to use in your wipes, your alcohol wipes, in the hospital, in what's used for solvents, etc. Your paint stripper, whatever, all these things that contain alcohol, they're not going to be najis because they are manufactured. They're not grapes which have changed into a wine and we're using them, or apple cider, or barley or wheat or whatever, and we made it into a beer or whatever. No, it's a different process. So I think that's an important analogy or understanding to make about how the difference between chemicals. And at the end of the day, there's no hadith or Quran which says that alcohol is najis. Okay? The khamr is najis, but not alcohol. Let's talk about tayammum a little bit. I'm not going to go too much detail in tayammum in certain aspects. I think a lot of the tayammum is related to desert conditions. Okay, alhamdulillah, we are here in a country, we have lots of access to water, it's all there. But tayammum essentially can happen for three reasons. All right, One is the absence of water. Secondly is the cold weather. And thirdly, illness. Alright, so one of those three can happen. If water is not present, okay, then again, like I said, no need to go into much details about it, but basically, if you are on a journey and you don't have water, you have to search for the water. And you have to do your best to find the water, okay? Now it all depends on your judgment of the situation. If you are certain that water is going to be around, you have to search for a certain distance. If you're certain that there's no water, then you don't have to search. Okay, so it really depends on your situation. So let's not talk too much about that, because I think it's more theoretical in this scenario. Although if you want to have more information, in the future, that can be addressed. So absence of water is usually in travel, and it's usually related to how certain or uncertain you are to find water. In addition, we say that you might have water in travel, but you need it. And you need it to drink, or you need it to water your animals or whatever, then also that tayammum is going to apply here. Now, in terms of cold weather, so you have water, but it's cold, freezing, and you're afraid that if you use this water, you're going to become ill, okay? And you don't have any means to heat it, and you need to do. You have a major impurity. You need to do ghusl. You need to do a wash. Yeah, your boiler's broken down. You don't have any access to hot water, and you need to do the ghusl. Okay, the wash. So what are you going to do here? Huh? No. Before tayammum. Huh? Search? You don't need to search. You've got water.
Heat it up.
Yeah. How?
And gas cooker or something.
No, there's no gas. Your boiler is cut off. How about a kettle? So get your kettle, boil it. Don't always think tayammum. First your options are the kettle. Okay. If you don't have a kettle, don't have a boiler, then what are you gonna do? What's another option you can do?
Leave it out.
Huh?
Leave it out for the water to acclimate.
Why? If you leave it outside, it's gonna be.
No, I mean,
it'll freeze.
you're having a bowl or something in the house, and then the temperature will slowly acclimate to the.
Yeah, but this is freezing cold weather, huh? So
Okay.
it's now 0 degrees.
Use microwave.
Microwave could be another option, or you could go to your neighbor. Okay, if your neighbor is friendly, you know them, you could borrow their kettle. So what you're saying here is basically you're not going to go to the option of tayammum for cold unless you have exhausted all the. Why? Because if you do tayammum for cold reasons, you're going to have to repeat the salah anyway. Okay, you're going to have to repeat the salah. So what you've done everything you can. You can't find any way to heat the water. You don't want to do ghusl, okay, because it's too cold. You're afraid you're going to get ill. All right. You're going to do tayammum. You're going to pray the fajr because you don't want to miss the prayer. And then when your boiler is fixed or you do have access, you're going to do ghusl and then you're going to repeat that prayer. All right. So that's why you want to avoid that kind of scenario, because the tayammum for coldness is an exception. It's not a normal scenario. All right, that's why you're going to have to repeat the prayer. So that's that. The third one we said is if you are afraid of illness. Okay, so here you have some sort of illness or some sort of injury. All right, your injury might be that you have a very deep injury, or you've had surgery. You've got a very deep wound. The stitches need to heal. You don't want to be doing any washing, whatever. So here you could do tayammum as well. So how is the scenario of tayammum? Basically, what you're going to do is tayammum is essentially to wipe to wipe the face and the arms up to and including the elbows with earth. Okay, and it's not washing with earth, it's just wiping. So basically you have to have the intention. Then you're gonna get some earth, okay, some soil, some sand, something that has some sort of dust to it. You're gonna strike it to allow the dust to come out. Then you're gonna tap your hands to get rid of all that. Then you're gonna wipe with the first one, wipe all your face. Okay? Make sure you're wiping all the face. Alright, so here, and here. Pay attention to under your nose because that can be easily missed if you go wiping all your face. That's it, just do it once. Then you're gonna do that again. Do this, then you're gonna wipe your arms. Alright, remove the ring if you have a ring, remove your watch, anything that's gonna get in the way. And then you're gonna wipe the other arm. And that's it. That's tayammum, okay? In the basically. Alright, you're gonna use something which is pure, something which is clean. You're gonna go to it in that regards. So, you have an injury on your, let's say you have had open heart surgery, okay? So you have a big surgery here, it's all tied up. You need to do a full wash, ghusl, okay? So what you're gonna do, you can cover this area. So if this is bandaged, okay? You need to wash it, isn't it? For ghusl, but it's bandaged. So what you're gonna do, that's already bandaged, okay? What you're gonna do is you're gonna wash the rest of the body with exception of this. So generally you're gonna wash the rest of the body without getting this wet. Then you're going to get a wet hand and then just wipe on this. Okay, that's just the wiping. And then you're going to dry your limbs and then you're going to do the tayammum. So the tayammum, which is the act of wiping with earth here and here, is instead of this portion. The tayammum isn't a substitute for everything because the rest you can wash. So you should wash whatever you can wash. But whatever you can't wash, and you have a bandage on it, you're going to wipe it, if it's possible, and then you're going to do tayammum instead of that. And that's fine. And you do that tayammum, you're going to pray. And that's fine. Alright? If you're going to do wudu, now the difference between ghusl and wudu is that ghusl doesn't have a sequence, whereas wudu has a sequence. So say you have now an injury on your foot, okay, you broke your foot, you've got plaster on your foot. You have to make sure before you put the plaster is that you have wudu, because you want the plaster to be worn whilst you have wudu, okay? Because it's like the socks, it's like the leather socks, you don't want to be putting them on without wudu. So before you go, when you're in the hospital and they're about to put the plaster on, just say, can I just make wudu? Just you put that plaster on, and don't be shy to do that because otherwise it's going to cost you if you don't. So you got the plaster, you made the wudu, and now you have put the plaster on. Now you need to do wudu, okay? Afterwards, yeah. Later on you broke your wudu, you need to do wudu. You got a plaster for 1 month. So what are you going to do? You're going to follow the sequence of wudu. So you're going to do the washing the face, washing the arms, yeah, wiping the head. Then you're going to wash your foot, that's sound. Then you're going to come to the plastered foot. You're going to get a wet hand and you're going to wipe over it. Okay? And then what are you going to do?
Do tayammum.
Do tayammum. Because that foot still needs a tayammum. The tayammum is a substitute for a part of the body that you cannot wash. So you're going to do it for the foot. Okay? Now, that's an easy one. What about happens if you have your arms in a plaster? So now your arm is in a plaster. So what you're going to do? You're going to wash your face. You're going to wash the arm that's sound. Then you have to do tayammum. You're going to wipe first of all with a wet hand, wipe the plaster. Then you have to stop, do the tayammum, because remember with wudu there's a sequence. This needs to be done in a sequence. So the sequence now is tayammum. So you stop, you do your tayammum, then you come back, wipe your head, wash your feet. And that's your wudu then. Alright? You see the sequence is important there for that. Now, if you put the plaster on without having wudu, okay, unfortunately, according to the Shafi'i madhab, you're going to have to repeat all the prayers afterwards. Okay? Once you take the plaster off, so khalas, now the plaster is on, you can't do anything about it. So you're going to pray, you're going to make wudu as normal, as I explained. But after you remove the plaster, you're going to have to make wudu because underneath it's not tahir when you had the plaster. So that's why it's very important that you put the plaster on when you have wudu. Also in the Shafi'i madhab, which is a little bit strict, is that if you put the plaster, if the plaster is on the arm or on the face and the arms are a part of wudu. Yeah, you wash them for wudu, isn't it? And you also wipe them for tayammum. So now your wudu, say it's on your arm, your wudu is deficient, isn't it? Because you can't wash it. And your tayammum is also deficient because you can't wipe it. Okay, so it's missing now. So because your wudu is deficient and because your tayammum is deficient, you have to also repeat the salah. Once it's very quite strict in the Shafi'i. That's if your plaster is on your arm or your face. If it's on your foot, that's fine because foot is not for tayammum. You're going to do the tayammum here, and that tayammum is complete. That's a substitute for washing the foot, or substitute for any part of your body. But once it's on the arm, on the face, your wudu is incomplete, your tayammum is incomplete. You have to repeat the salah. Okay. But even the repeating, you don't have to repeat that. Say you have 1 month worth of plaster, you don't have to repeat it all in one go. You're going to do it slowly, on your own pace, because it's an exception here. You haven't done this on purpose. You just, it's just a scenario, unfortunately. Okay, so any questions about tayammum?
Simple things like you had a cut on your finger, you would put a bandage. Then what happens when you do wudu? Because then I guess the water's not going through the bandage.
Yes.
Are you supposed to remove the bandage?
If you can remove it, then you should remove it and wash. If you can't, because again it's missing a washing area. So, but if you can't, or you're afraid that the healing is going to delay or whatever, then you could do the tayammum, but you're going to have to repeat if it's on your hand. Because the wudu is deficient, the tayammum is deficient. If it's on any part of your arm or face. If it's on your head, it's not a problem because your head, you only need to wipe a little bit of your head for wudu. You don't have to wipe all the head. Okay? So tayammum is, you don't tend to use tayammum a lot, but it is it's there if you need it in terms of your illness, in terms of your whatever. Tayammum is done with, like say, earth or sand, so anything which plants can grow from can be done with that. It has to be tahir, as you mentioned before. You're gonna wipe as I showed you. And if you're doing tayammum, because tayammum is an exception, you have to do tayammum for every salah. Okay, until the water comes back. If you're missing water or the coldness or whatever, you have to do the tayammum for every salah. Okay, and that is tayammum. We don't do tayammum with a stone or a rock. I think the Malikis do it with a rock. So they have a rock just based here. No, in the Shafi'i you can't do it with a rock. It has to be with earth. It has to be earth, and earth which has dust. So you have to be able to get something out of the earth so that you're right.